everyone, and welcome to a More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we are talking about morning routines. So we're going to be looking at how to create a morning routine and why you should. Hope you'll join me today for this episode. Welcome to a More Beautiful Life Collective
podcast. We know that in the hectic hurry of everyday life, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. This is a moment to pause and realign your focus on the one who gives us peace and rest. We're focusing on discipleship, productivity, and homemaking as we live with eternity in mind. This is the place where you'll learn to create a life you love and cultivate your heart for God. I'm Casey Fletcher. Thanks so much for joining me.
Everyone, and welcome to season 2, episode 17 of the podcast. Today we are talking about morning routines. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about routines in general and how routines are basically like the building blocks of our life. As we create our schedule, we want to add in all of these different routines to our life that help us to get things done. They help us to be the people that we want to be, to do what we want to do. And we think of our routines in the form of building blocks, puzzle pieces that we kind of take in, and take out based on what we want to accomplish. Our routines are jump-started by anchors, and you can go back to that episode and listen to that if you want to learn more about that whole process of creating your routine. But one of the things that I think is so important and often overlooked is creating a morning routine. Now, you might be like, overlooked? Everybody and the brother talks about morning routines. And the thing is yes, to a certain extent, people know that their mornings are very important and they want to start their day out right. But at the same time, yes, they say that, but they don't necessarily put into practice what they know to be true. And so today, this is my encouragement to you to think about how you're starting your mornings, because how you start your morning is how the whole rest of the day is going to go. If you're interested in any of these things or creating your own routine, you can go check out the shop at amorebeautiful.com/AMBL shop. There you'll find resources that help you to set goals, create routines, and make sure that you are creating a life you love. As we think about who we want to be, we have to think about our habits. The first step for creating habits is to imagine this ideal version of yourself, who you want to be based on your values and what you deem is important. And then from that, you can figure out what goals will get you to be more of that person. And then we figure out habits that help you to reach those goals. That's basically how you should create any kind of habits that you do in your everyday life. So today we're going to think about how your morning routine can incorporate these habits and help you to achieve that goal of being the person that you want to be. So the first thing that we always have to do is we have to assess. We have to see what we're currently doing. So what would be your answer to the following questions? So first off, how early do you usually wake up? Now, with all of these things, I think we should have a few days of rest in our week. Your wake up time could potentially be the same every day. Like I try to wake up at the same time every day, but recognize that as I talk about our morning routine, I know that your work days are different than your rest days, and you should have at least one day that's a Sabbath, that's a rest day. So whenever I ask you these questions, I'm asking more about like your average work day, not necessarily the weekends. So if you work a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, we're thinking about Monday through Friday. If you work 4/10s, we're thinking about the days that are your normal work days. And then maybe on your day that you have off, you even get to have a more extended morning routine. All right, so first, how early do you wake up? And then when does your first mandatory event or task of the day take place? So basically this would be like, when do you have to go to work? Or when do your kids wake up? When do you have to take your kids to school? So when is the first thing that it requires you to get up and get moving and start your day for real? How much time do you have between that wake up time and that first mandatory event? And so once you figure out that, that's basically your building block. That is the time that would be what you would use for your morning routine. And once you have done that, think about some things that could fill that time. Now, you may notice as you're making this list that you have no structure or tasks that normally go in that time. Like you wake up, maybe you look at your phone for a little bit, maybe you watch the news, maybe you drink your coffee and kind of sit on the couch and just say, oh, I have to wake up. But whatever your routine is, those are things that you're doing that fill that time. But it could just be things that are not structured. You also may notice that maybe you've been perfecting the morning routine since you were, in college. And so either way, I hope that you listen on and you learn about how to continue creating that consistent routine. And maybe you'll even add some things into your routine that you don't have now. So maybe, if you're like a gym guy and you go and you work out every morning, maybe you feel like, hey, my morning routine is good because you go to the gym. But maybe you don't read your Bible in the morning, or maybe you're letting some other tasks around your house kind of slip through the cracks because you're so focused on these other elements of your morning routine. So this will just help you to be a little bit more balanced as you create that morning routine. Now, why is this important? Well, a meaningful and purposeful morning routine can genuinely change your life by choosing to be intentional about how we first wake up and use those first few hours of the day. You can create a series of habits that help you to grow closer to all your goals. And you're going to be more productive in the first few hours of your day than most people are by the time that they get back in their bed at the end of the day. This is the time that you can use to make an impact on others, to use your time well, to be effective in your ministry, which is something that we're all about here on A More Beautiful Life Collective. And it's also a way that you can make sure that you're setting some time aside each day deliberately to cultivate your heart for God. Now, the next question we have to ask is, what's so great about the mornings? There are some people who, so I have mentioned this before in the podcast. I am a morning person. As a kid, I liked to go to bed at night. I never really fought sleep, which now that I have 2 young kids, and I also see everybody around me, I realized that was a very unique thing. Most kids hate going to sleep, and they might still wake up at 6:30 in the morning, but that fact that I love going to sleep and I love waking up in the morning, it was something that it's just always been a part of who I am. But that being said, I know that there's a big group of people that are like, we hate the mornings. We hate that people try to get us up in the morning. Why does it have to be morning? I'm working. I need to get my sleep in the morning. Maybe they're like, the only time that I have by myself is those hours from like 9 to midnight at night. And so why am I going to wake up in the morning? And for you, this is what I would say. I would say, yes, you do need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. If you're sleeping less or more than that, there's probably an issue. There's probably something that you would need to change in your schedule, or what you're eating or not eating or drinking. But when you sleep is essential. And I think that really comes down to routine, and it's not genetics or personality type. I think in our culture, we have a lot of things that we try to put down as like our identity. Like, this is just who I am. I'm just not a morning person. But really what you're doing is you're using this identity marker to say, yes, I know I should do that, but I'm not going to. So don't bother me about it. But really, that's not the best way to handle those situations. They say that the best sleep that you get, the most impactful sleep, is any sleep that you get before midnight. It's like worth double the amount of sleep as the sleep that you get after midnight. So I think a lot of people, they do put off things, and they try to say, okay, well, this time from 9 to 12, like, this is my me time. So I need to stay up and use those hours well. But the thing is, just change your mentality, change your focus, and get sleep whenever it's more bang for your buck from those hours from 9 to 12. And then in the morning, you could get roughly the same amount of time, but you're just getting it at a time where you can be more productive. So if you shifted your sleep schedule from, 11 to, 7 or 8, you could shift it up a couple hours Most people don't go to bed at 9, but you could shift it up to be in bed by 9:30 where you're reading and kind of winding down. So you're shifting it up a couple hours, or maybe even just an hour, where you gain that more productive time in the morning. There's a lot of research about the best time to wake up in the morning, and a study done of the most successful CEOs found that 64% wake up at or before 6 a.m., with 9 out of 10, so 90%, waking up by 7 a.m. So importantly, you need to pick a time to wake up and stick to it to feel refreshed. So whatever time, whether you decide that you want to get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., you need to say, okay, I'm going to devote myself to this. And I'm not going to let my feelings kind of get in the way of it. I'm going to wake up at this time, because they say that if you vary your sleep schedule by more than an hour, you may feel social jet lag because of your wake up time. So basically that would be like on the weekends, you shouldn't sleep till 11 if on the weekdays you're waking up at 7. And so if you're waking up at 5, even 5 to 9, like that's a big jump if you're waking up at 5 on the weekdays and 9 on the weekends. So you want to kind of keep it within that same hour. One thing that can help you to decide when you should wake up is when you figure out how much stuff you want to get done in the morning. Once you calculate how much time you need in the morning, you can generally set your wake up time, and then you could be consistent with it. And so that might be something that, you start off by saying, okay, I'm just going to wake up 30 minutes earlier. You get used to that, but then you realize, oh, I would really like another 30 minutes so I can add this other element to my morning routine. And so then you might back up that time a little bit. Habits, they operate in the same way as the laws of motion. So it's easier to keep something going once it's going, rather than stopping and starting it along the way. Morning routines can be life-changing because they combine all of the best parts and research of habit making that can be found in books like Tiny Habits and Atomic Habits and The Power of Habit. Generally, a morning routine is something that's itty bitty. It's tiny. It's, waking up and reading, a couple verses in your Bible, or waking up and reading a devotional, or waking up and walking a mile. Some of those things could be big if you've never done them before, but for most of those things, they're very little. It's not like you're waking up and going and running a marathon. But as you stack those habits together, you really begin to make big gains towards the goals that you want. So once you establish when you want to wake up, the next thing that you have to do is you have to figure out what to do in the morning. So what should be in your morning routine? And I'm going to give you kind of a checklist of items that you can add to your morning routine, keeping in mind that everyone's answer to this is going to be different. There's certain things that maybe it would work better at a different time of day. I'm always, and I've mentioned this before in a couple other podcasts, I think sometimes we're too quick to add certain caveats to our days, which and our decisions and the things that we say. And so because of that, we may end up limiting ourselves because we're trying to say, hey, it's okay, you do you. If you can't make it work, it's fine. But I think we really need to challenge ourselves and say, okay, am I using these first couple hours? Am I devoting it to what it needs to be done? I've heard people talk about the morning routine as basically their first fruits. And so, that's a biblical term for a sacrifice. It's something that you were supposed to devote to God. And now we even practice this. Most people, they tithe from the first part of their paycheck, not the last part, because they're giving their first fruits. They're devoting the first thing to God. And so I think this is the same with our mornings. If we can devote those first few hours to God, we have already changed the trajectory of our days because we've reminded ourselves whose we are and who we are in the morning time. If you tell me, looking through this morning routine checklist that we're about to go over, that you're not going to do the things that are on this list, I would just say that you would need to be honest with yourselves of why you're choosing not to do these things first thing in the morning. You may have found the best place for them later in your day, but more often than not, if you don't do them first thing in the morning, they just probably won't get done. And then again, you're going to be behind on your goals and not consistent in your in your habits. So what are the key parts of a morning routine? There's a book called The 5 a.m. Club, which is it's an interesting book because it's a self-help book, but it's written in a narrative form about this like guy who talks to a guru about a morning routine. It like changes his life and turns it around. But basically, I can sum up the whole book in this one sentence, so you don't need to read it if you don't want to. But basically, he learns to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and then he spends the first hour of his day doing the following. So he exercises for 20 minutes, then he reflects or meditates, journals for 20 minutes, and then he learns something for 20 minutes. So basically, he reads a book. As you think about your morning routine, I think there's some elements, that the 5 a.m. Club is written from a secular perspective, which from a secular perspective, if you have no spiritual direction in your life, those 3 things are very important, and that they will help you feel a little bit more mindful, and then it'll work on your physical body and your intellectual capabilities. But I think as a Christian, it's missing God from that list. Kat Lee, she wrote a book called Hello Mornings. And her book is about how to build a grace-filled, life-giving morning routine. And she recommends the following. So again, she divides it up into 3 things. And what she recommends is whatever time that you have in the morning, even if it's just 15 minutes, you could still do these things. But her 3 things are God time, plan time, and move time. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. But basically, God time is at least reading, memorize, praying through a verse. Then she also recommends plan time. So you check your planner, you make your to-do list for the day, and then you try to move a little bit. And so for her, whenever she was really overwhelmed and, the season with young kids, she would try to do each part of this routine in like 3 minutes or less. So she would say a verse, she would think about her to-do list, like her big thing she wanted to get done that day, and then she would drink a cup of water, and that was her morning routine, 3 minutes. So even if you cannot do any other thing that we mentioned in this podcast, because your life is just that full, you could still do this morning routine of having God time, plan time, and move time. But I think if your life is so full that that is the only time you can devote to it, you may need to think about what you are filling your days with. Yes, there are times I'm due in December, and so there's going to be times where my life is a little bit busy with having, 3 young kids, one of which is a newborn, homeschooling, trying to do other things. Like there's a busy season of life that's coming up for me. But even though that's the case, if that's just like your status quo, it's not like a season of, newborn season or maybe a really busy time at work. If that's just how you are all the time, you may need to think about adding some more margin into your day. I would recommend that your morning routine should also add in some elements of maybe self-care and cleaning time to make sure that you're taking care of cleaning yourself, but also your home. I think that's something that we often overlook in the morning, but doing a few things in the morning can help you to get a handle on your home so that you feel less overwhelmed in general. And so the Fly Lady, she is a lady that if you ever have struggled with keeping your house clean and you feel like you're just kind of like a slob, her tagline is "A slob comes clean." And so you can read her books, and she has a blog, and she has this whole like cleaning routine. But she recommends that you do these small steps every day, one of which is getting dressed to your shoes, even if you're not leaving the house, which is something for stay-at-home moms, or if you work at home, just kind of switches your mentality where it's not, you're not there to relax. You're going to be doing some work to get you feeling more productive. And so that's just one simple step. And she does some other things in the mornings as well, and in the evenings to keep your home looking nice. So this would be my checklist. So if I combined all the things that we talked about, I would say that every day you should have some devotional time. Devotional time, and I probably will do a post on kind of what I think your devotions should look like. Some people don't even like the word devotions or quiet time because they think it's too, I guess, evangelical. I don't know. But basically your devotions, it's you read your Bible, maybe you journal about it, you pray about it, and maybe you have a little bit of worship time. I think some people, depending on their personality, you might feel a little bit different singing at home, but you could still listen to some worship music or even just spend some time in prayer, praising God. That is also worship. But I think everybody, that should be a part of your morning routine. And honestly, that should be the first thing. We talked about the first fruits of your morning. I think your devotional time should really be the thing that you do first thing after you wake up. For me, I do make a cup of coffee first, but then I try to do that. And part of that is just because if you do it first, then even if other things come up in your day and you're not able to do a full hour-long morning routine, you've still gotten the most important thing done. So after devotional time, I would recommend having some time for reflection. We've talked about morning pages before on the podcast, but just having some journaling time to kind of process through your issues. I think at night, if we try to process through our issues, we often fall into like the doom and gloom kind of mentality, or, depending on your personality, we just kind of fall into this thing of like, the world is terrible and everybody hates me. So I think it's better just to go to bed. And then in the morning, you can think of solutions because you're looking more at your day as something to be tackled. So I just recommend journaling in the morning if you do decide to journal. Then I also would devote some time to reading and learning. The CEOs do it every day, but I think that's something that's beneficial for you. I try to read a chapter in my book every day. And so I read like 5 different books at one time, but I try to devote that time in my morning routine to really reading a book that's a little bit meatier. Maybe it's a book related to theology. And then that way you're able to really confront the ideas, but you're also savoring it. It's not something that you're just trying to, plow through a book. I think sometimes we get to that point where we're kind of reading, but we don't really understand what we're reading. Having that time in the morning, you can savor books a little bit better, just reading a chapter a day. And then you're still, if you don't read the rest of the day, you've still made a little bit of progress on your goals. I would also devote some time to planning. So checking your planner, making a to-do list, maybe making your top 3 for today on a sticky note so that you know what you need to get done that day. You could have some time for self-care. So just getting ready for the day, getting dressed, having some time drinking your coffee. Maybe this would be time where you could combine it with exercise as well. Home care. So I have talked about this multiple times, but I always, whenever I wake up, if I have a full dishwasher, I unload it. I start a load of laundry. I try to make my bed in the morning, do a little pickup around the house. If you can do the things in your morning routine where if nothing else got done that day, if something came up, you were out of the house all day, you did not get to, do anything related to your household stuff for the rest of the day, could you do enough in your morning routine where like your house wouldn't fall apart? And so I think that's something with your home care. If you can do those things in the morning, all of what I just mentioned, starting a load of laundry and unloading the dishwasher and picking up a little bit, that's maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20, depending on how much you pick up. But that's something that helps the house at least stay in a state where it's not getting so chaotic. And then lastly, exercise. We all know about exercising in the morning and why it's so beneficial, but it's something that, you just have to make time for it and make time for it in a way that makes sense for your family. So some of the ladies I used to work with, they would always exercise in the afternoons. And so if that works for you, that's fine. But I think most of us, if we don't exercise in the morning, we don't exercise at all. And so that would be something just to think about how you can incorporate that in your morning routine. That would be my list of things that a morning routine should have. And you could think about how to pick and choose what you would want to do. And in each of those things, obviously, there's a lot of different options for how you could fill that time. So for reading and learning, there's a lot of different options. You probably are going to read a book. But what book you read, the options are endless. Planning, how that looks, it's going to be very different. It could be you actually sitting down with your planner. It could be you having a meeting with your family. It could be you checking in on your phone and looking at any messages or anything that you need to get back to people about. So, the options are endless as far as how you implement this morning routine checklist, but I think it's just important for you to think about what you could do in that morning time. Now, the real question is, okay, we have this list of things that we know we should do every day to keep growing and thriving. So you can go back and listen to the last episode on routines, and I kind of talk about how my routine and my morning routine has shifted, where, I have lived through all of these different changes where I've tried to have a routine and then I didn't have a routine. And then now I have a pretty solid one where I do certain things that help me to accomplish what I want to do. But what I would recommend for you to think about is how you can add time blocking and schedule looping into your schedule. So you may not be able to do everything on that morning routine checklist every single day, all the time. It was especially tricky to fit all of those things in whenever I was working because, at school, with public school, you'd have to leave at, between 7 and 7:15, especially to drop kids off before school. And so that's only like 2 hours. And so if you wake up at 5 a.m. and then you also have to get ready and get packed for the day and get the kids ready and stuff. And so it didn't get done every day, everything that I wanted to do on the morning routine checklist. And so what you can decide to do is, instead of trying to hit those things every day, one, decide your non-negotiables. So if you know that the thing that you need to do every day is you need to do your Bible reading, your devotional time, or maybe the thing that you want to make sure that you do is unload the dishwasher and start a load of laundry. You put those things first, and those are the things that you do every day. But you also may add in some elements of looping your schedule, which basically this is just a term that means you don't do the same thing every day. You just do the next thing the next day. So that's what this means is, let's say you have 3 different things that you want to do. You want to make sure that you go to the gym at least every couple days. You want to make sure that you have a longer period of time to clean your house. And then you want to make sure that you have a stretch of time to read a book. You may not hit those every day. So basically every 3rd day, you would try to hit that thing on your schedule. So what this means is basically in the mornings, every day you read your Bible, but then you would do the next right thing on that day. So if it was your gym day, you would go to the gym after that. If it was your reading day, you would read your book after that. And so then this way you can kind of incorporate some change to your schedule, and it also definitely shortens your morning routine so that you can fit it in to the morning. You could also just say, if you woke up late in the morning, let's say your goal is to be awake by 5, but maybe you wake up and it's 6:30. Again, this is where I would just do the next thing. So if you know that your non-negotiable is that you have to read your Bible every day, you want to read your Bible every day, then that would be the thing that you do, and you would skip the rest of the stuff. Or again, if you had a little bit of extra time, you could say, okay, what can I fit into this time that, maybe I could read a couple pages in a book, maybe not the whole chapter, but just to get it done. So this is the way that you make it flexible. I think the issue that people run into is they try to plan out too much in their morning routine, and then they wake up late, they don't do anything, and they wash their hands of it and say, I'm never going to try that again. This is where, you just have to roll with what's going on. If you have young kids and you're trying to do everything before they wake up, one of the things that is actually the easiest way to make it work is just recognize sometimes you're going to be doing your Bible reading or reading your book or exercising with little kids around, and they're probably going to be crawling all over you, but it's okay. I think opening up the opportunity of saying, yes, it might not be the ideal, but you're still getting it done. That is something that will help you to stay consistent in your morning routine. Earlier this year, I have a pretty solid routine, but earlier whenever I was morning sick, there were several mornings where I was I couldn't get up out of bed. I was taking some stuff to help with morning sickness that would make me drowsy. And so it was 7 o'clock and I was barely rolling out of bed. I was who is this person? But the thing is I let my devotional time go because I was always waking up at the same time as my kids. And then finally I was like, okay, I'm never going to read my Bible again unless I just open it up, even if I'm opening it up and reading with my son on my lap. And so in doing that, I actually started to read my Bible again. Now I'm waking up earlier, and I'm getting it done. And so I think that's the thing that we have to understand is that one, our mornings are our first fruits, and we want to make sure we are using them well. We want to live in a way that glorifies God, which means we need to make sure that we are using our time well. And so one of the best ways we can do this is making sure our mornings are used well. But that requires some intentionality and planning. We have to decide how we want to use our morning routine. And then it also requires us to say there is some element of flexibility in our lives so that if something comes up and we can't do the thing that is our ideal, we still are making progress and moving forward. So I hope that this helps you to know why making a morning routine is so important and to try to do that in your life. You can look on the blog at the post for this episode, and you'll see a list of ideas if you are wanting to start any of these elements in your morning routine or start all of them. I have some just ideas of how to do these different aspects of your morning routine. You can also get a morning routine checklist and kind of plan out your morning routine if you visit the blog. So I hope that this has given you a lot to think about as you create your routines, and I will see you next week for the next episode. You can find any of the resources that we've mentioned in the show notes. You can also find other resources and Bible studies at the blog at amorebeautifulLifeCollective.com/AMBL shop. Until next time, I'm Casey Fletcher, and keep creating a life you love and cultivating your heart for God. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. If you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts to help others find the show. While you're there, you can like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the blog and our store for more encouragement and resources on how to create a life you love and cultivate your heart for God. I'm Casey Fletcher, and I'll see you next week.